No, you're quite right. Let's pick it up 120a. Either you've got a Gemara, if you've got a Gemara Pesachim, that's Kuf Chof Omid Aleph. And let's pick this up just under halfway down the page, if you've got the attachment, where it says the word Gasa, probably about 12 lines down. And then there's the 2 dots, Omar Rova. This is really looking at, and you've got the psukim as well, if you've got the attachment around the side. And it's really focusing, we'll see, about the whole mitzvah of matzah. We might have, we did, of course, we learned Avi Psachim as well some time back, but it's worth refreshing our memories. Or have you got it where it says Omar Rava? Yeah, the beginning of the line is Gasa, about 15 lines down the page. Kuf Chof Omad Aleph, Omar Rava. Yeah, you got that? Thumbs up from someone to show got it. Kuf Chof Omad Aleph, Gasa, beginning of the line, and then 2 dots. Yeah? Do we have a thumbs up?
Yeah.
From anybody? A thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed. Omar Rava. Matzah bisman hazeh to oraisa. Nowadays, the mitzvah of eating matzah is min ha-Torah. However, morar is only, I would say only, it's midrabanan, and we'll have to look at the psukim here to prove that. So the mitzvah of eating matzah at Seder night, of course 2 Seder nights, but it's the first we're talking about is min ha-Torah. And I think you're going to have to scratch your head and search any other occasion nowadays without the Beis HaMikdash where an eating, the actual food is min ha-Torah. Yes, there is a mitzvah min ha-Torah to eat in the sukkah, but eating we're saying that there's a mitzvah to eat an item, matzah, and that is a mitzvah, a tick if you like, min ha-Torah. Even today, whereas morar is midrabanan. Eating morar is midrabanan. Says the Gemara, umay shana. What is the difference between why midrabanan, there's a pasuk in the Torah telling you to eat morar, there's a pasuk in the Torah telling to eat matzah? Why shouldn't they both be applicable today? Says the Gemara, umayshno mora. What's the difference between mora? Next line, dichsiv, where the pasuk says, and I think you've got it around the side, number 1 on your psukim, al matzos umaroirim. Have you got the pasuk there? Al matzos umarorim yochaluhu. You should eat it, the korban Pesach, with matzos and mora. Ah, that's very interesting. It sounds like you should eat the Pesach together with matzah and mora. Continues the Gemara. Bisman, at a time, de'ika Pesach, when there is the korban Pesach, yesh mora. Then min ha-Torah, there's a mitzvah to eat with it mora as well. Ubizman deleka Pesach, at a time when there is no korban Pesach, because that's a possible mention actually in the Seder itself. Al matzos umromim yochaluhu. You should eat the korban Pesach together with matzah and mora. So the Gemara says, you're telling me that mora is not really applicable today, min ha-Torah. Why not? Because you're not eating Pesach with it. The pasuk says, eat the Pesach, the Paschal offering, the lamb, together with mora. Continue the line again. Yesh mora ner ubizman de leka Pesach, at a time when there's no korban Pesach, leka mora. There's no mora. So says the Gemara, I can understand therefore why eating mora today, it's a mitzvah midrabanan. Yes, lighting Hanukkah lights is also a mitzvah midrabanan. But it's not min ha-Torah, because the Torah says there's a mitzvah when you eat the korban Pesach to eat it with moror. Well, you're not eating a korban pesach, so moror therefore is relegated, and it's no longer a mitzvah min haTorah. But if that's the case, says the Gemara, matzah nami, why don't you say the same with eating matzah? Why? Hokasiv al matzos umarodim yochlu. The word yochlu is out, but yeah, it's that same pasuk which tells me when you eat your Pesach offering, eat it together with matzah and moror. If you're not eating the korban pesach, I can understand that eating moror is only midrabanan, but then the same rule should apply to matzah too. Why was it that Rava said even today, eating matzah at Seder night is a mitzvah min haTorah? Says the Gemara, matzah mahada hadabo beikra. There's another pasuk, only in reference to matzah. This is the crucial point. Says the Gemara, there's a pasuk, and you've got it down as number 2. Is that, have I got the right source here? That's right, number 2. In other words, the mitzvah of eating matzah is mentioned twice. It's mentioned in reference to the korban pesach, eat it together with the korban pesach, but it also mentions it on its own. It's got a pasuk just talking about the matzahs, not mentioning the korban pesach. So therefore, from there we learn, says Rava, that there's a particular mitzvah to eat matzah min haTorah. Okay, now drop down to the beginning of the line is trichi, about 10 lines from the end. The beginning of the line is trichi. Have you got it? 10 lines up?
No, I haven't been in the dining room.
Well, I've not been in all day.
Peter, maybe we mute everyone. I'll come off if you like.
It's okay. I'm muting.
Oh, you can cope with that?
Sorry, Norman, I muted you because someone else muted and it moved.
That's fine. No, fine. No problem. Beginning of the line is utsrichi. 10 lines up or so. Have you got it? Trichi. Says the Gemara, Tanya Kavose de Rava. We've got a brisa which actually supports this view of Rava. And what is Rava saying? Rava is of the opinion, and we paskin like this, that albeit there is no korban pesach, sadly, nevertheless eating matzah on Seder night is a mitzvah min haTorah. And we've got a brisa earlier supporting the view of Rava. What is that brisa? Look at this. Sheishes yomim toichal matzos. You've got it down as your number 4 in your list of psukim. 6 days you should eat matzos. Uvayoy mashvi on the 7th day, atzeres lashem elokecha. It means atzeres really to stop. It's an occasion where you stop from working. It's a Yom Tov. As we know, the 7th day of Pesach is a Yom Tov. But notice there it says, 6 days you eat matzos. Very interesting. There's another posuk, actually just prior to that, which talks about Shivas Yomim, for 7 days you eat matzos. I can read this posuk to you, right in front of me here. This is 16:8. This is in the end of Re'eh. 16:8. The pasuk number 3, not mentioned in the Gemara, the pasuk number 3 says, Shivas Yomim, Toichel Olav Matzos, Lechem Oini. So there's a pasuk that says you should be eating matzahs for 7 days. Don't forget, in Eretz Yisrael, 7 days Yom Tov. Here, 8. 7 days in Eretz Yisrael. A posuk says 7 days. We've got a posuk here. Have you got it back to our Gemara? There's another posuk which follows this previous posuk, which says Sheishes Yomim Toichal Matzos. 6 days you're eating matzos, and the 7th day it's Yom Tov Atzeres. You stop. It's Lashem Elokecha, but it doesn't say you eat matzos for 7 days. It says 6 days. Interesting. 2 psukim seem to contradict. This is crucial. Says the Gemara. From there we learn a very interesting principle. Says the Gemara, Ma Shavi'i Rishus. It turns out, therefore, this posuk is saying only 6. You should eat matzahs, not the 7th. We have another posuk which says 7. This posuk is saying no. Sorry, 6 days you eat matzahs. So now it's telling us Ma Shavi'i Rishus. It's telling me the 7th day, as it only mentions 6. The 7th day is Rishus, which means it's not obligatory. Rishus means it's up to you. You want to eat matzahs? Gesundheit, enjoy. In fact, it may even be, it will be a mitzvah, but it's not compulsory. Okay? That's what we learn from the 6. Says the Gemara, this is also interesting. Af sheishes yomim rishus. All the 6 days now. In other words, let's start again. A posuk says you should eat matzah for 7 days. Then the posuk said, no, I didn't mean 7, I meant 6, which means that last day is no longer compulsory. Says the Gemara now, we're learning that it's not just the 7th day which is not compulsory. The 6 preceding days are also not compulsory. If you want to eat matzahs, very good, a mitzvah, but it's not compulsory. Now, how does that work? Ma Tama, says the Gemara, what's the reasoning for this? And people may remember it from davening in the 13 principles. Havidova shahoyo bichlal. There was something which is included in the general rule. The yotza min haklal. It was in the there was a general rule to eat matzahs for 7 days. Eat matzahs. That's the posuk. Shivas yomim toichel matzahs. Then it says 6, which means that 7th day is no longer compulsory. Look at the Gemara. So the 7th day has come out of the general rule of 7 days eating matzahs. So there's a rule which says if you have something which comes out of the general rule, lelamed is coming to teach. Lo lelamed al atzmo yotza. It's not just coming out of the general rule to teach for itself. Ela lelamed al haklal kulo yotza. It's coming to teach us for the whole, all those 7 days. It's not compulsory. Don't turn off here because we haven't finished yet. Have a look at the Rashi, gentlemen. Have a look. There's a few Rashis we need to look at. Begins, Shavi'i Rishus. Beginning of the line is Rishus. Halfway, I'm not looking at Rashi, I'm looking at the Rashbam. Rashi's grandson, because there's no Pirish Rashi on this point. Actually, there is. Let's go to his Zeta, shall we? Second line down. We've got, as we may remember from Avid Psochim, you've got the Pirish on the page of Rashi and his grandson, Rashbam. Have a look at Rashi right at the top, the second line down.
Sorry, no, which is the klal? Which posuk is the klal? Which is the yotzna?
Oh, right. The klal is 7 days. Have a look at Rashi. Top second line down. Second line down in Rashi.
Yeah.
Shvi Rishus. Dichsiv uvayoim hashvi atzeres. The lo kasiv toklu matzis. Shaharei hotziu min haklal. It's come out of the general rule. Now, Rashi doesn't tell me what the general rule is, but it's actually in the previous pasuk, which says, Shivas Yomim Toichel Olav Matzos. So an earlier pasuk in Re'eh, just a few pasukim earlier, tells us you're meant to be eating for 7 days. Then there's a pasuk which is taking out that 7th day from that general rule. If that's the case, says Rashi, we have another rule. A rule is if you have something, a general classification, an exception is made of one of them, then that exception is coming to teach for the whole group. Have a look at Rashi now, 3rd line down. Af sheishes yomim reshus. Reshus means voluntary. If you want to eat matzahs, very nice, and it's a mitzvah, but you don't have to. She'im, continues Rashi, im roitza, if you want to. Of course, if it's Shabbos, you'll have to actually have some matzah. But im roitza yochol lechol bosa below lechem. If you want to, only sun is even to fast. It's not compulsory to eat matzah.
I mean, that's not exactly true,
now,
because on the 7th day, Norman, you have to have something, don't you? It's not entirely true that, because on the last day of Yom Tov, or the Yom, even the Yom,
you've got to eat. You've got to eat.
You have to make hamotzi, don't you? You have to.
You'll have to be, yeah, but not because that's the point. It's not because it's Yom Tov. It's not because there's a mitzvah, a compulsion. You're eating because you've got to, I say, have a meal. But there's no compulsory mitzvah attached to it. You do not get a tick. You've got to eat matzah. You with me? Or not?
Yeah.
No, you don't have to eat matzah.
Norman, can I eat chometz then?
No, you can't eat chometz. Chometz is out. But you don't have. Let's take one of the days of Chol HaMoed. If you don't want to, you fancy fasting. There's no compulsory mitzvah to eat matzah. Now, we haven't finished yet, but now the ruling is, because it only says 6 days, the 7th day has come out of the rule. It's telling me when you eat matzah on the 7th day, you have not fulfilled a compulsory mitzvah to eat the matzah, whereas it's voluntary. And now the whole group of 7 days, there's no compulsion to eat matzah, right?
But on the 7th day, you have.
Of course, you can have meals,
don't you? On the 7th day, it's Yom Tov, so you have a compulsion to have a suda with motzi and benching, don't you?
Well,
I'm not talking about this one.
Shabbos Chol HaMoed, the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good. Hello, David. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
yes. But it's interesting. It's true. You've got it very. It's an interesting point here. You've got to have a meal, but when you eat the matzah, you're not fulfilling a compulsory mitzvah to eat matzah as matzah.
Okay.
There's no compulsion to eat matzah. It's a subtle point here. There's a chiyuv to have a meal, but there's no compulsion to eat matzah. Maybe you could get a. Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Go on. No, you're exciting.
But there is a compulsion not to eat chometz.
Absolutely, that's for sure. We haven't finished yet.
But does this mean that this pasuk is then overruling the earlier pasuk?
Absolutely, yeah. It's explaining what it means. We thought
the
at the
pasuk
beginning
says that you have to eat b'charash sheni, but about the
steady on. We're going to get there.
Which pasuk?
We're looking at two. Hold on. There are 2 pasukim we're looking at. One pasuk is you haven't got there, where it says Shivas Yomim Toichel Olav Matzos. We have another pasuk which says 6 days you're meant to eat matzahs. It's explaining that when it says 7 days eat matzahs, it's not saying you have to eat matzahs. It's saying there's a voluntary mitzvah that if you eat matzahs, you may want to have a meal. That's up to you. You may want to fast. There are occasions when it may be preferable to be fasting but there's no compulsion to eat matzah, and you're fulfilling a compulsory mitzvah to eat the actual matzah. It may be possible maybe to have a meal. Sometimes you can have meals maybe without the matzah. We've learned before that maybe it's possible to have we could maybe through wine may be considered a sufficient wine, but matzah as an item, it's not compulsory. Hold on, that's what we're saying at the moment. Now, so far, we've therefore removed what we said before. David, you're absolutely right. Continue the Gemara. Beginning with line Lelamed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up.
Yeah.
Yochel af laila harishain. Whoa. If this is what it's telling us, it seems to be telling us from these two psukim that we've looked at in Ra'eh, that what the Torah wants from us to say is there's a voluntary mitzvah, it's voluntary. If you want to, wonderful. You don't have to. And now we've said, and that is the Torah said it, dressed it up in this way to tell us that when the Torah says 7 days you eat matzah, it's not saying you must eat matzah. It means you can eat matzah, and if you do, you're doing a mitzvah, but you don't have to. In which case, we now go back to our earlier postuk. Says the Gemara, Yochel af laila rishon rishus. Maybe Seder night, some people may like this idea. Seder night may not be compulsory. Eating matzahs on Seder night may not be compulsory. Says Gemara, no. Talmud loilma al matzos umerorim yochluhu. We've got another posuk which says when you eat your korban Pesach, you've got to eat it with matzah and maror. Well, there you are. That's a compulsion. So when you eat your korban Pesach, you've got to eat it with matzah. So therefore, eating matzah on the Seder night is min haTorah. Says the Gemara, this is the final piece. That's all very well when there was a korban Pesach. Says the Gemara, Ein li elo bizman shebeis hamikdosh kayom. That's all very well when there's a Beis Hamikdosh, and there's another posuk telling us that when you eat the Pesach, you've got to eat it with matzah and maror. Fine, that's when the compulsion comes in. It's a chayva. The rest of the time, the rest of that night, and the rest of the time you want to eat matzah, good for you. You don't want to, you don't have to. Says the Gemara, Ein li ela, 4 lines up, bisman shebeis hamikdosh kayam. That's nice. When the Beis Hamikdash is there, and there's a korban Pesach, remember to have it together with matzah and maror. Says the Gemara, bisman she'ein Beis Hamikdash kayam minayin. What about today, gentlemen? Sadly, we haven't got a korban Pesach. Does that mean now that eating matzah at Seder night is again voluntary? Yeah? Says the Gemara, no. We're going back to the posuk we saw earlier, Talmud Loima. And this is the support for Rava. This is what Rava said at the very beginning, if you remember. Matzah bisman hazer de'oraisa. There's another posuk. Bo erev toichlu matzahs. That night, you must eat matzahs. HaKosov Kavo'oi Chayva. The Torah is telling me and making it obligatory that night. So it's beautiful. It's now going back in. The Torah is placing back that matzah, even if there's no korban Pesach. I'm putting it back in as it was previously. Bo erev toichlu matzahs. You've got to eat matzahs. So it turns out Seder night is compulsory, and that means people who are having difficulty eating the matzahs are really to try as hard as they can, because it's a positive mitzvah. Of course, doctor's orders may tell you can't do that. That's a separate point. But a person, even though it may be a struggle, a person must on the first, and we're talking about Sidorim, you must have as much as I say capable. you should be having a chiyuv to eat matzahs. The rest of the week, you want to have matzahs, good for you. You don't. Of course, you're right. There's a separate point having a meal, but it's not so much the matzah which is there. You've got to have a meal. But otherwise, if you don't want to eat matzahs, it's not compulsory. That is in Kuf Chav. So that is the
voluntary mitzvah. The concept of voluntary mitzvah, I find a little bit difficult to understand.
A talus. Wearing a talus. If you have a four-cornered garment, you put tzitzis on it. If you do not have a four-cornered garment, you don't put tzitzis on it. If you haven't got a talus, I haven't got a talus. If you put it on, it's a mitzvah. Yes, it's now become, still not compulsory, but wearing talus, wearing tzitzis, it's a wonderful mitzvah. Why not do it? It's not compulsory.
Well, there are a lot of other examples of what you would call involuntary.
Not many where it would be, it's up to you. It's in, you can almost say, I'll give you another example. Cholamoid Sukkos.
Yes, I was going to say.
Cholamoid, hold on. Oh, you wanted to say that, Robert, did you?
Yes.
Right, well done.
No, it's the first night of Sukkot is obligatory to be in the sukkah, just as the first night of Pesach.
Absolutely, very good. You're right. Very good. We learned that well. A good, very good call. You're right. The first night of Sukkot is compared to the first night of Seder. But let's go through. Hey, here we are, David. Here we are, Chol Hamoed, and you're doing your wonderful. I don't know. You're doing a bit of Chol Hamoed, so you're on holiday. So you're doing a bit of walking out in. You haven't got a sukkah. You haven't got a sukkah, so there's no mitzvah of sukkah. I mean, okay, you have trouble about eating outside of sukkah. There's no mitzvah of sukkah. You're not machui. The first night you are actually obliged to eat in the sukkah. The rest of the week you don't have to. If you want to go for a walk, go for a walk. Don't have to sit in the sukkah. The first night of sukkahs, we will tell that person, I want to go for a walk, actually all night. I'm going for an all-night walk. We will tell that person, no, not the first night of sukkahs. I'm sorry. You've got to sit in the sukkah. It's obligatory one night, and the rest of the nights is just say a voluntary. Not many mitzvahs.
It's still praiseworthy,
although
not compulsory.
Absolutely.
But does it?
Absolutely. It is a mitzvah.
Is this part of the Tariag mitzvahs?
I can't hear you.
Tariag, does it come within the Tariag?
Oh yes, it will be. Yes. There's one of the Tariag mitzvahs is if you have a four-cornered garment, putting tzitzis on it, and if you put it on, that you've done a mitzvah. Absolutely.
It's conditional.
There's no compulsion. I haven't got a talus. What can I do?
Well, it is compulsory, but it's conditional.
It's conditional. It's conditional. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So in other words,
way, it's not compulsory.
I could daven without a talus. I could be shliach tzibur without a talus.
Strictly speaking, you can, and there are plenty of places that are doing it today.
And shliach tzibur as well, without a talus. I don't need to wear one.
Now, there's a separate point. It's not, as you say, covered for the tzibur, for a shliach tzibur, normally to wear a talus. You're quite right. But strictly speaking, it's not a must. And that would be very different to the mitzvah. Well, we do say, putting on tefillin is a mitzvah and a must. Yes, the way we do it is we wear the talus and then the tefillin. But shliach tzibur, strictly speaking, doesn't have to wear talus. No, it's not compulsory. It's very, as I say, it's covered. It's the honored thing to do. So we've now concluded this piece, and that just tells us about the mitzvah of matzah Seder night is compulsory. So you've really got to do.
We need 3 pesukim. Then it comes out. We need 3 pesukim. The first to tell us that the first to tell us it's rishus because it's Yotzav in our class.
Yeah, it's a brilliant way to tell us. How are you going to explain that this mitzvah is not eating matzahs every single day is not compulsory? The way it works is brilliant. You've got a mitzvah telling you for 7 days, sounds like compulsory. Then the mitzvah says 6. So we know the 7th is not compulsory anymore because that's out. So that's coming now to explain that all those whole 7 are not compulsory. And therefore, we've got another posuk then to tell me al matzos rorim yochlu. And then we have the final posuk, which puts back, even if you haven't got any Pesach, nevertheless, matzah. Now, this is the crucial point, gentlemen. That posuk, bo'erev tochlu matzahs, it does not say bo'erev tochlu maror. It does say al matzos rorim yochluhu. You should eat the Pesach with matzah maror, and when you do that, you'll be makayim a mitzvah, a mechiyuv. But that's exactly what Robert says, and that's where we came in today. Matzah bisman hazeh d'oraisa, a maror is only midrabanon. Okay? Now we turn the page. I know we've got lots of attachments, and I'm not going to get through many of them.
Where is that third posuk? I can't see it on the side there.
That posuk we've got here, as you can see.
I can't see. That's what I'm asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, oh, you haven't got the attachments? I thought Peter said them
I have
through.
got. Yeah, no, I have. I'm daf chof ches. Kuf chof.
Yeah, kuf chof. I look at item number 1, postuk number 1.
That's not the. Sorry, where's where?
It's not the obvious one. We went into that. As a separate piece. In fact, that's the posuk we mentioned on Seder night.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Yeah, it's actually talking about Pesach Sheni, but there's a comparison between Pesach Sheni and Pesach Rishon. That's a whole Gemara. But al matzos u'merorim yochaluhu. You should eat it, the korban Pesach, with matzah and maror. You've got to do that. Okay? Right? So there we are. We now turn the page. So we've worked out the matzah is compulsory the first night. Now, let's turn to the next page, which is Kuf Chof Omid Base, the second attachment. And the question is, when do you have to eat the Korban Pesach? And that's very important because when you eat the Korban Pesach, it's at that time you're meant to be eating matzah and maror with it. Now, it's true, Pesach's gone, sadly, we haven't got the Pesach, but we've pushed back matzah as if there was a Pesach, and we've still got a mitzvah in our Torah, so we need to know the time frame for eating Pesach. And here we have 2 Tanoim that we will be meeting again Seder night. And here they are. Have a look at the beginning of the line, which says Yosef. It's about 12 lines down, Kuf Chof Omid Base. Have you got Kuf Chof Omid Base? Well done. It said Desanya. We got a brisa. It's actually being brought for something earlier, which we're not going to look into now. Desanya. We got a brisa. Now here we have another posuk. Va'ochlu es habosa balayla hazeh. It's number 1 on your psukim round the side. They should eat the bosa on this night. But notice it says balayla hazeh. You eat it balayla hazeh on this night. Seder night they were eating. This was in Mitzrayim. There's a big, as you see, a machlokas here as the 2 Tanoim that again, hopefully will be greeting in a couple of nights' time. One is Rabbi Loza ben Azariah. Have you got Rabbi Loza ben Azariah? Rabbi Loza ben Azariah omer ne'ema kan balaylo hazeh. In this pasuk it says, but this night. What does it mean, this night? What is the night? Is the night the whole night, part of the night? What do you classify as this night? Part of the night? It says later. Now, there's also a pasuk before we get to the next piece telling us that you can start eating once it gets dark. There's another pasuk elsewhere telling you you can start eating the Korban Pesach. The question is, how long have you got to eat the Korban Pesach? You eat it at night. You start at night if you want to. How long have you got? Say you're busy doing something else. Says they continue the Gemara, I've got another posuk. This is number 2 on your list, which is actually just a couple of psukim later, and the pasuk says, "Va'ovarti I, Hashem, will pass be'eretz Mitzrayim balaylo hazeh." I will pass balaylo hazeh, on this night. When did that take place? We're talking here about Makas Bechoros, the death of the firstborn. When did that take place? That took place at midnight. Mala halon ad chatzos. Afkan ad chatzos. Yes. What it means is I'm going to be passing, although it says ad, it means at that point of time called midnight. That's when Makas Bechoros will take place. Similarly here, when you're eating, we know you can start eating the Pesach from the beginning of the night, from nightfall. You can eat it balaylo hazeh until this point when Makas Bechoros was taking place. That's what it means, balaylo hazeh. The final point is the same time when Makas Bechoros took place. That is when you should be eating your Pesach. You've got until then to eat it. Okay? That is the view.
One question: where do you learn it from that you need to eat it when it's night?
There's another pasuk elsewhere from Devorit, from Ra'eh. Asking questions here, these boys today. Yes. Tizbach es ha-Pesach bo'orev, uchavoy hashemesh, when the sun sets. There's 3 times mentioned in the Pasuk in Ra'eh. When it's talking about Pesach, it says Tizbach es ha-Pesach, shecht the animal. Rashi quotes there. Bo Erev, there, Bo Erev, interesting. That Erev means when it's getting dark. In other words, in the afternoon, you're shechting the Korban Pesach. Kavo Hashemesh, when the sun sets, you can start eating. And then it said, Moed Teischom Mitzroyim, and you have to burn it if you what's called Noisa. So there's a pasuk which says, Kavo Hashemesh, when the sun sets, when it's night. The end of the day, Kavod Hashemesh, when the sun's gone, the end of the day, that's when you can, if you want to start. But it goes up to the time of Makas Bechoros, which is at midnight. That's very interesting, as we're talking about Makas Bechoros. Makas Bechoros was at midnight. People are familiar, or maybe not familiar. I don't know if, Peter, you can just bring up for us Safari. I should have asked you this before. There are 2 psukim.
One other question. Where do we know it was at midnight?
Oh, very good. Go to Tanakh. Press Tanakh. Widen the screen. Test Tanakh. Go for Exodus. Go for chapter 11. Oh, good. Shemos, yeah. Chapter 11. Pasuk. We want 11:4. Thank you very much. Kachatzos halayla. Can you just the screen maybe a little bit larger, but yeah. Otherwise, if people can read it, that's great. Okay. All right, with that, we can see that Pasuk Daled. Can you see that, Simon? Vayomer Moshe koi Omar Hashem, kachatzos halayla ani yotze b'soich Mitzrayim. Notice that very interesting wording there. Kachatzos halayla. Kachatzos, like, yeah, like around midnight. You know, I don't want to be too specific about this. Now, just scroll down, please, to 12:29. Just keep scrolling. Or you could go to the top of it. 12:29 won't take you a minute or less, of course. 12:29. Now look at the pasuk. This is when it happens now. Vayehi bachatzi halayla, in the middle of the night. Vashem hika kol b'chol be'eretz Mitzrayim. So there you are. In chapter 12, it talks about bachatzi alayla in at the. Now notice the base. Can you now go back, please, Peter, to 11:4? It's all Simon's question, you see. 11:4.
Is there special simon to midnight? Is there special remes with midnight? Anything which is specific about it? Why it should be midnight?
Why it should have been midnight?
Yeah, why midnight? Yeah. Is there simon to midnight?
Yeah, this is a changeover. As we're moving, it's beautiful. This idea of midnight is that's the final. As from then on, you're moving towards day, and that's exactly the significance of Klal Yisrael. They were in Mitzrayim, they were in slavery up to that point. At that point, that is going to be the end, and from then on, it's looking up.
No, but why? But why Makar Bechorot at midnight? Is that simon to midnight?
Yeah, that's the what you mean. What do you mean by simon?
I mean, is there like a specific reason?
It's the final makar.
Yeah.
And it's the final point after which they will no longer be slaves. That's when Paro will say, "You're free." It's the build-up to the final point of night, the darkest, if you like, the midnight, the middle of the night, and from then on, moving onwards and upwards. And the Makas Bechoros, which is that final Makkah, which is the final, as I say, Makkah Bapatish, the final point, after which they will become free. So everything closes and changes at midnight. But the crucial point there, the only thing is, in Pasuk Daled, he says, Kachatzois halayla. Now let's just scroll up to Pasuk Gimel. One there. No. Actually, is that the Pasuk? V'ovarti. Could just come down. Well, no, actually, what we need Pasuk Daled really. If you look at Rashi, press to commentary Rashi. You could go to Hebrew if you want. Yeah, let's go to Hebrew first. Come down Kachatzos Halayla, where it says V'Rabusenu Dorshu Kamoi Kachatzi Halayla. Have you got it in that Rashi? V'omru she'omru Moshe kachatzos. Why did Moshe say kachatzos? Moshe, when he's explaining what's going to be happening, he tells them around midnight. Look at this. Shemashma, reading the last three lines of Rashi. Somuchlo, nearby, olafona v'lachrov. V'lo oma bachatzos. He didn't say bachatzos. Shema Yitu at Tagnine Pharaoh. Maybe these astrologers of Pharaoh will make a mistake because they can't. Now, press the A button, please. We'll have it in English. Look at the last part of this. Our rabbis took out which implies just before the end, because he feared lest the Pharaoh's astrologers might. I lost it. Oh, here we are. Might make a mistake as regards the time when the story of the person actually took place, thinking there was a little earlier or a little later than midnight, and would say in consequence of this that Moshe is a liar, made a mistake. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was scared that maybe the astrologers will get the wrong date, the wrong time, and that's why he said around midnight. That's a beautiful pshat I saw. Why should these astrologers get it wrong? I mean, they're experienced astrologers, and they should be able to work out the times. Very interesting. If Hashem is sweeping through Varti at midnight, it depends exactly where you are. At midnight in the east, of course, it moves. As you move west, midnight keeps moving, doesn't it? Midnight in Eretz Yisrael compared to here is, of course, very different. So we got the same thing happening here. As Hashem is sweeping through Mitzrayim. And whenever midnight is happening, and of course it can be a couple of minutes, depends how large Mitzrayim is, it depends whereabouts you are, it's going to be slightly different. And therefore, I saw a beautiful pshat. This is coming from the Rabbi Aryeh Leib Lipkin, his name is. He was a cousin of the Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, going back a bit. And he explains beautiful. It actually happened bachatzois at midnight. But Moshe says kachatzois because he says you won't get it spot on. It depends where you are in Mitzrayim. And you'll come back to me, if I say at midnight, you'll say, some people on the east side slightly before, some people slightly later. And that's because it depends where you are, where Chatzos is. Do you understand the point? It's like in London. You can't say, or the whole country really, you can't say in England what midnight moves as you move from east to west. You with me? So that's why kachatzos halaylo, around midnight, that will be the time that people die. It will be either, if you're in, let's say, central Egypt, it will be slightly earlier if you're to the east and slightly later if you're to the west. Be that as it may, let's go back to our Gemara.
Wait a minute. The point was that Moses says he's not like the Almighty, so he can't be exact. It's not because of the geography. I mean, at each point, if it was the Almighty saying it, you'd be able to say when the Chatzos was.
You're saying that's very nice what you're saying. That's not what Rashi's saying, because he feared as far as astrologers might make a mistake as regards the time when the slaughter of firstborn actually took place. Thinking it was a little earlier, a little later. No, you're right. What you're saying, Mervyn, is very nice. You're saying kachatzos, it's very hard to actually have it spot on. But what we're saying here, according to this pshat, may or may not be fitting with Rashi, but it's a beautiful pshat. He's saying kachatzos. He says for you people in the palace, it will be around midnight. There'll be some people right on the extreme east of Mitzrayim, slightly earlier than us people here in central Mitzrayim, and some people in the left, in the west of the country, slightly later. That's why he's saying kachatzos.
But those people at the extremes, their midnight is a few minutes later, isn't it? I mean,
that's exactly why he says kachatzos. For us people here, it will not be. Imagine whatever time midnight is, at the palace. People will be dying right. If that's the time we're fixing, it's going to be either slightly earlier or slightly later than that midnight. It's like GMT. You've got 12 o'clock. It's actually, although it's called 12 o'clock, they're actually dying slightly earlier than 12 o'clock.
So really, it's a question of geography as opposed to the angels with
yes, absolutely.
Abraham, where they're all in one place. It wasn't an issue there.
Right, absolutely.
So it's a question of geography, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, isn't the point more than sort of a technical explanation of why it could be a few seconds out either way? Isn't this more specifically about the possible misinterpretation of the astrologists?
Yes.
If you specify a single second for something, then you're setting yourself up for potential quibbles from these people who say, so it's not. It doesn't need to be to do with your being a few seconds out in the east of the country or a few seconds out on the west. It's simply don't set yourself up to claim
absolutely.
Something
You are
they
absolutely
mistakenly claim to be wrong.
You are quite right, and you're right, Sam. That is the normal way. I'm just suggesting an alternative from this. You're right. And particularly if you think about it, midday is a little bit easier to calculate than midnight. How do you do it midnight? If you think about it, we got a quartz. You can have a quartz watch if you like, but without that, how do you work? I mean, and this is, I'm just stressing your point. It's absolutely right. How do you, astrologers say, oh, you're wrong. Mike, actually, maybe the astrologer's watch is wrong. That's what you're saying. You're quite right. That is the normal interpretation. And I think Mervyn's saying the same thing, kachatzos. I'm just suggesting an alternative pshat, saying even if they do get it spot on, it's still a kachatzois regarding those people who are sitting in the palace. And it actually, if they're using the same, imagine, watch, if you like, it's called 12 o'clock, people will be dying slightly earlier to the east and slightly later to the west of 12 o'clock, but not of midnight. That's the point.
It's not, yeah, but it's not entirely satisfactory because these astrologists are going to be aware of the fact that you move to the east or move to the west and midnight changes a few seconds either way. So they would know that fact. So that in itself would not cause a denial of the accuracy of.
No, but if they said it will happen at midnight, they may.
Relative to where you are.
They may say it didn't all happen at the same time. If you said Bachatzois, it sounds like everybody's going to die at the time it's midnight here in the palace, and that didn't happen.
Is it realistic though? I mean, if millions or hundreds of thousands of people are being killed in one night, and
yes,
the Khatumim come along and say, "Oh, well, we don't need to worry about that because Moshe he prophesied it was going to be at midnight, but actually." It was at 2 minutes before midnight, and then 2 minutes. I mean, it seems an incredibly petty quibble to make.
Yes, it is.
In plague.
Absolutely. But if this is meant to be perfection, and if your God says midnight, he didn't do what he said. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I think people will still be quite impressed by the.
Impressed, yes. Impressed, yes, but wrong also, yes. I agree with you. It's pretty impressive, all those people dying. And the firstborns, some people didn't even realize they were firstborns. They've suddenly realized that it was their mother actually had an affair with somebody and he's a firstborn. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. The Gemara talks about that. There are a lot of people in houses, they didn't realize that they were firstborns. But you're right. What I would say to you, impressive, yes, but wrong. You said spot on. So you're right. I'm just suggesting this. And Sam, if you prefer your pshat, which I think is the norm anyway, yes. Let's just go back to our Gemara to conclude this, because we haven't actually got to the Mishnah Berurah yet. This is all the view of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Akiva is of the view that it's not midnight. He learns from the word bechipozoin. The Pesach says later on, you should eat it bechipozoin. So what have we got here? According to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you're allowed to eat the matzah or no Pesach until midnight, right? That's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Omar lo Rabbi Akiva, we can continue the Gemara, we'll have to do this quickly. Va'alo nema, Rabbi Akiva's coming from a different word. There's a word chipozoin. You should eat it in haste. And what it means by in haste, it means at a time, ad shas chipozoin, a time you've got to have to hurry a bit, you're being told to eat the Korban Pesach, because you're going to be on the move. And that's what it says, ad shas chipozoin. It means until the time that you're going to be very hassled to move out and leave the country. And that will happen at the beginning of the day, right? So although it says chipozoin, you're eating it hastily, you're eating it, what it means, you're eating it up to a time that you're going to be very hasty and pushed to leave the place. So you're eating the Korban Pesach. It doesn't mean until midnight, says Rabbi Akiva, you're eating it until the morning. So we have a very big machlokas here, Rabbi Akiva against Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and the other people follow these two Tanoim. Do you say eating Pesach is the same? Eating Pesach is at midnight, and in which case matzah, we just explained before, matzah will follow. Why? Because whenever you're eating your Pesach, you're eating your matzah. And even if there is no Pesach, we're putting back the mitzvah of compulsion to eat matzah, the same as Pesach, right? However, Rabbi Akiva is of the view that in fact it goes right up to the morning. You're allowed to eat your Pesach, in which case you're allowed to eat your matzah, right up to the end of the night. Right. There's one final point, and that's another Gemara. There is a view, we won't have time to go through all of this. There is a view that, if you remember, you're eating the Korban Pesach. It's meant to be at the end of the meal. It's meant to be after you're like not totally full, but you've had a good meal, and then you're having the Korban Pesach according to Hillel. Remember, it's eaten a la sova, which means the afikomen that we have today, according to Rashi and the Rashbam, his grandson, is when we perform the real mitzvah of matzah. Now, I know we start off the meal and you make achilas matzah, but it's real, according to Rashi and Rashbam, not everybody, but the Rashi and Rashbam, it's the matzah that you eat at the end of the meal, which is the real mitzvah of matzah you're doing. You could actually very quickly go to Kuf Yutes. It was a third attachment. Have a look at the Rashi. E maftirim achamatze afikoimon. Have you look at the Rashi where it says afikoimon? 6 narrow lines down. Shetzorech lechol matzah bigma hasuuda. Zeichel matzah as a memory of that matzah. Hanecheres in Pesach. Remember we explained before al matzah saronim yochluhu. Now this is what Rashi holds. A lot of people disagree with Rashi and the Rashbam. Most people say when you eat the matzah at the beginning of the meal, that's when you're doing this compulsory eating of matzah. Says Rashi and his grandson. V'zu hi matzah habetzuya. This is the broken matzah she'ono ochlim that we eat for acharona at the end. L'shem choivas matzah. Wow. Rashi says, although you make a bracha at the beginning of the meal, hamotzi and achilas matzah, and you eat some matzah, that bracha achilas matzah goes right across, and its real function is for that afikomen. When you have that matzah at the end of the meal, that is the mitzvah of the compulsory matzah. Wow. Oyso shelacha achila. And Rashi then goes in to explain how you can make a bracha al achilas matzah so much earlier, and he's got other examples for that too. A typical example we find is with shofar, without spending a lot of time. Shofar, when you blow the shofar, the main shofar is normally during the Amidah or after Chazor Sashat, but you blow the shofar before you start the Amidah too. You can have a bracha like Lishma Kol Shofar, even though it's for something later on, and here was doing the same thing. I say no time to really elaborate on the fact, but all we're saying is this. We've now seen a double machlokas going on here. There's a machlokas, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says you've got to eat the matzah until midnight. Rabbi Akiva says until the morning. Right? That's matzah today. Right? The same would have been with Pesach. Then we've got another machlokas. When is it that you're doing the mitzvah of eating matzah? Is it when you eat the matzah at the beginning of the meal? Most people hold that. The Shulchan Aruch holds that. But Rashi and the Rashbam hold, no. Your main mitzvah of doing the eating the matzah is with the afikomen. It's called the afikomen. It's dessert. It's either a misnomer. Afikomen means dessert. Don't have anything after that because you want to keep the taste and remember the whole atmosphere and everything you want to keep with you. Let it linger. The messages you're learning from Seder night, you want those to continue as well. So we have this double machlokas. Now, if we can, turn to the Mishnah Berurah. We'll have to be quite quick through this. Have you got the next? No, it's not the next. It's the one. You'll have to skip an attachment and go to the one which is in the Mishnah Berurah 477. Have you got that one? And this is very important, particularly this year. Now, I know it depends how long your Sidorim are, depends how many people you've got with you, etc., rules and etc. But in particularly this year, where we're still officially in GMT, Chatzos is, I think, 12:06. Now, it's quite late. But if you've got a lot of people, I don't know how many people you're going to have. I'm not going to go down there. It can linger. And you may find, and particularly it's Motzei Shabbos, so until you start, it may be a bit later than normal. So the beginning of that night is later, and you've got, say, a midnight, which is 12:06, right? Look at this halacha. Have you got it? Tov Ayin Zayin. La'acha Gemar Kol Asuda. Oichlim, you eat mi matzah hashmuro. This is the guarded matzah, which is tachas hamapo. Under this is serviette. Kazayis kol echod. Zeicher le Pesach hanechal al hasoiva. It's a memory of remember the Pesach is eaten al hasoiva, right? It's a memory of that. Now Rashi would say, when you eat the matzah, it's a memory of the matzah you ate there, because that's when you were doing your mitzvah. Watch this space and eat it leaning. You don't make a bracha, you've already made a bracha al achilas matzah at the beginning of the meal. Now look at this. Be very careful. Try your best to eat it before chatzos. Wow, before midnight. Now, that may not be very difficult. It may be if you're starting late and you've got a lot of people, until you actually get round to the afikoimon, maybe 12:06 is getting very close. Be very careful. Look at this Mishnah Berurah at the bottom. V'yehei zoher. The bottom. Now, hold on. Actually, before we see that Mishnah Berurah, why do you have to be careful to eat it before midnight? That's only if you paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. If you paskin like Rabbi Akiva, you don't have to be careful at all. You with me? It's only if you hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that the matzah must be eaten the compulsory. You can eat voluntary matzah, but the compulsory matzah must be eaten before midnight. You've got this problem. But if you're eating, you can eat right through till the end. That's no problem. Look now, the Biur Halacha, which is also the Chofetz Chaim, V'yei Zoher. Ki Mishnah, look at the Mishnah Berurah, what I've written there, okay? Ki, why? B'Gemara Isa. Have you got it? Second line of the Biur Halacha. L'das Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we've just learned that. The Pesach min ha-Torah eino nechol al ad chatzos. You can only eat Pesach until midnight. Got it? Third line down. Hu adin matzah. De iskish le-Pesach. It's compared to Pesach. Remember? Al matzah sumarim yachlu. Rabbi Akiva palig. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Olov on him. And he holds the Pesach zeman achilos kol halayla. You can eat it all night. Umemela. Similarly, who adin matzah zamana min haTorah kol halayla. Now look at this. The yesh pelukta. There is a machlokas. We're now the fifth line down in the Biur Halacha. Have you got the Biur Halacha, the fourth attachment? The yesh pelukta. There's a big machlokas. A pelukta means a split. Bein or Rishonim. If the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, why should the halacha be like Rabbi Elazar? Remember, people may be familiar with the klal. There's a general rule. The halacha Rabbi Akiva mechaver. Normally, when it's a one-on-one, Rabbi Akiva, you'd expect Rabbi Akiva to be the halacha. But the trouble is, there are lots of stam mishnayos over Shas. I will continue the Be'alot Mishum Yesh Habe Stoma Mishnah Kabose. There are lots of mishnayos, nameless, anonymous mishnayos. Now, they're not anonymous. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who was actually collating all of this, but he particularly wanted to tell us the view of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But there's some, actually, Rabbi Akiva, Mishum Daloch Rabbi Akiva Mechaveiroi. So we got now a balance. Do you paskin like Rabbi Akiva because Aloch Rabbi Akiva against his friend, or do you paskin like all these Stam Mishnayos? But now look at this. very quickly rattling through this for you, gentlemen. V'das Rambam, V'Rava Magid, Ubalu Ito, V'Ozer Ruah B'Shem Arimi Kuvil, Livsoik Zman Achilas Matzah Kol Halayla. You can eat matzah all night long, in which case, no problem at all. Certainly not the Afikomen, and certainly not even the first Kazayas. V'Yeshomrim, the Gam Das Rivke. Sounds like the Rif also holds like this. Midehishmit Meimed Rova. He left out the statement of Rova. The Omar, next attachment. The Achilas Matzol Achachatzos Leyotzerichavose. Remember, we just saw that in the Gemara. He left it out. The Rif left it out, which means he also holds, therefore, Lo Yotzerichavose Rabbi Los Ben Azariah. Sounds like he's asking about Rabbi Akiva. With me? Now look at the other side. This scales. Ochein, yesh harbe migdole or rishonim. Many great rishonim. Medieval poskim. The sphere who they hold. De la acha chatzos lo yotza yedei choivosai. Wow. Vaheim. A few a list for you, gentlemen. Rabbeinu Chananel in Perek Albi Psochim. The Smag Sefer Mitzvahs Godel. B'Shem Ari Bala Tosfos. Keep going. Tells you where these other Tosfos and 9 square brackets. Have you got it? Da, 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 da. End of square brackets. And the Mordechai. And Rabbeinu Yerucham. V'chein Metzadada Ozorua from Vienna. From Ozorua. Medieval commentary from Vienna. Good one. Gamkein. V'lo Yotza min HaTorah. V'horokeach. V'horosh. V'horajba. V'horan. Mistapkim b'zeh. Oh, wow. There's some people who aren't sure what the halacha is. Because of the Alkain, that's why Yeshli Zoesh Lo La'acha Yosem Echatzois. Wow. And some people hold, even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says you're allowed to eat it all night long, it will fall into the normal category that there should be a fence at midnight. Now, having said all of that, gentlemen, now look at the Mishnah Berurah. And we'll finish with this. V'yehei Zohir, bottom line, or go back to the previous attachment. The last line of the Mishnah Berurah. I'm now in the Mishnah Berurah. You got it? Yeah? The kiven shu zeichel Pesach tzorich le'ochlo bizman Pesach. Ba Pesach eina nechol ela ad chatzos. Really? Because we don't know how to paskin. Many people paskin, like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that it's only until chatzos. And that's the way the Shulchan Aruch's going. Continue the Mishnah. Look at this. For Kolshkein, how much more so? I'm now on the next attachment for the final lines of this Mishnah Berurah. For Kolshkein Kazayas Rishon. Certainly, that first piece of matzah that you have must be eaten. If you want a tick, has got to be eaten before midnight. Wow, it's a strong word from the Mishnah Berurah. Be very careful. Don't delay it after 12:06. Okay, gentlemen, let me ask you this question. It's now 12:10, and you haven't eaten your matzah. What are you meant to do? What would you say, gentlemen? It's 12:10, and for whatever happens, your visitors took their time getting to you. By the time you get to eat the matzah, it's 12:10 a.m. What are you meant to do?
Well, you can do it. You can eat it, see what happens. I'm joking.
Yeah, no. There's nothing.
But seriously, it's only hakaka. The serious point, he says just the hakaka. But yeah, he doesn't say b'diavad not yoytze. He's just saying it's the chatzchila.
Good one. Very. 1 minute. Are you a Rabbi Akiva man or Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah man? Where's your? I can't see who you're supporting. If you're a Rabbi Akiva man, yes. If you are a Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah man, no. So the question now is, can you make a bracha? Al achilas matzah. Look what the Mishnah Berurah says. Look at this. Ub'di'evet. If it happened, b'di avad, if it happened, im eichar, and of course we explained before, of course you can always eat matzah, as we said before, the voluntary eating of matzah that can happen anytime you like, but you cannot make a bracha al achilas matzah when it's not compulsory. Look at this, mistapkim or rishonim, there's a doubt. Im Yotzi Dechavosai. The Alkain there, we just learned that, didn't we? Do you pass like Rabbi Akiva? You pass like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Even if you pass like Rabbi Akiva, you're right, it's only a hachoka, but if you pass like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you are out. Alkain, look at this.
Well, is that true? He doesn't say it's also, does he? He just says, I mean, I don't know what the Lashon is.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says the mitzvah is until midnight. That's the end of that. Very simple.
Yeah, fine.
You can eat matzah. You can eat as much matzah as you like after that, but you have not fulfilled the chiyuv that you've got, the compulsory chiyuv. Look what he says. Okay, look at this couple of lines of Mishnah Berurah. I know it's late. You cannot make a bracha ala achilas matzah. So there you are. You got the doctor sadly called out, and it did happen. We had Seder once with Dr. Ardley. He was called out in the middle of Seder. It came back luckily before midnight. Only just. I remember that. You remember that well. But yes, if somebody comes and it's after midnight, and he says Mora as well. You've got to eat it before midnight. Full stop. In fact, he then goes on, we haven't got time for it. If a person comes that late, imagine they roll up at 11:15 or 11:30, what should they do? Basically, get your skates on. And what you can skip, that's the next piece here. So all I'm saying is you can see the fundamental, it is a mitzvah, you're eating the matzah. You can see here from the Mishnah Berurah, it is the only mitzvah we have today where you have a chiyuv min haTorah to actually eat a particular item. So whether you learn like Rashi, which means you've got to get the afikomen in before chatzos, try your best there. But certainly that first achila, because that's the achila you're going to say ala achilas matzah on. It's true. We may not paskin like Rashi, and therefore it may well mean that we paskin. It's the first kazayas that you eat. When you eat the matzah at the very beginning, you're doing your mitzvah. It's only according to Rashi and the Rashbam, it's the afikomen. You still got to eat afikomen and make sure it's before midnight. But it's not the same as that first eating of the matzah. That actually has to be, as we said, before midnight. So with that, gentlemen, let me.
So what's the status of eating Erev Yom Kippur? Isn't that a mitzvah as well, Min HaTorah?
Erev Rosh Hashanah, you mean?
Erev Yom Kippur. Isn't that we learned
you're
this?
Right. There's a chiyuv to eat to make sure you're look after yourself and can actually sufficiently well to go through the fast according to most people. It's true, but there's no specific mitzvah to eat an item. You can, if you like bananas, keep eating bananas in Erev Yom Kippur. Nothing wrong with that at all.
But it's a mitzvah of eating.
There's a mitzvah here's a mitzvah to eat a particular item, and that I say is only on Seder night. Let me just finish with something else. People, just to remind you, there are Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. I think we're going to have to bring up Peter again. Sorry, Peter, call you back. Could you please look up for us back to Shemos on this? I've probably got him there from before, or do we have to go through all that? We may have to. Do you remember this gentleman? If you don't, worth reminding you. Oh no, can we go to Exodus 14? 14, 23. Stop. People familiar with that pasuk? I know we're talking here about by Yerudafu Mitzrayim. You got the translation for us? Yeah, we don't need the unfortunately, we just got the translation. The Egyptians came in pursuit after them into the sea. Have you got it, pasuk 23? 14:23. Now, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, you remember that, gentleman? No. Mervyn, don't remember Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld? Look at the letters. Kol, sus, you can probably put the arrow towards it on that posuk. Kol, sus, paro, richbai, those 4 words. Kol, sus, paro, richbai. Got it? 4 words?
Yeah.
What it means, the Egyptians came pursuit after them into the sea, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen. Can you see those four words? Koil, sus, all horses of Paro, Richbo. Can you see those? Take the first letter of each of those four words. A chaf, a samach, a pei, and a resh. Now, is anybody good at anagrams here? Chaf, samach, pei, resh. Can you make a word out of those four letters? Chaf, samach, pei, resh. Shout out, please, anybody who can. You may have to come off mute.
Casper.
Casper, no.
Karpas.
No, I know Casper. No, you're obviously a chess player. Kasparov, no. Casper, no. I remember Mother Casper. Yeah, good man. Chaf, samach, pei, resh. But we're not turning off until you get this. It's an anagram.
Karpas.
Those four letters.
Karpas.
Who's that? Who is that?
Charles.
Who's the first man to say that? Charles. Well done, Charles. Thank you, Charles. It's always the young people who get this first. Kolsus paro richbo uforosho. Kolsus paro, oh, beautiful. Says Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. It's a remez. You've got karpas. And what does the posuk say? What do you do with all of that? Look at the last three words of the posuk. El toich hayom. Yes, we have the karpas, and of course it's an extra dipping, and it's a children. Everybody should be asking. We're doing so many different things today, and the karpas also is hoadoma, which is the same as a mora. But there's a remez when we take the karpas and we put it in the salt water. It's a remez too. I know it's the first day of Pesach, but it's something will be happening a few days later in history, which is Kriyas Yamsuf. Taking the karpas, Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld says, taking the karpas, putting it in the salt water is a remez to the end, as I say, the end. And if that really was the end, when until that point in time, Klal Yisrael, although they had the Geula, they'd left. Peter. Yes. So I say just something to as a starter. And we've said before in previous years, we've spoken about the matzah now, tonight. Crucial, the whole point of the Seder, really, we're talking about the Geula, we're talking about this redemption, Klal Yisrael together. Actually, it's very interesting. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, according to, was a Kohen, they're Levian, and that's Maaseh. Remember the story? Maaseh, lovely, beautiful tune. And the people who were there at this particular Seder, you've got Rabbi Akiva, who was a Ger, coming from Gerim. You've got Kohanim there, Leviim there. These people, you might have thought, would be exempt from the mitzvah, because after all, the Kohanim didn't have the slavery quite as tough, but nevertheless, they're part of Klal Yisrael. Gerim, you might have thought, well, they weren't there. No, yes, they were. We're all part of Klal Yisrael. We're recounting Yetzias Mitzrayim, which means that's when we become a people together, every member. Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, Gerim, everyone, we're all in this together. We become one people. And crucially, we become one people, but the one people, it's not just, a good Jew at heart. It's got to be actions. That's always the limit from all of this. Not just saying, oh, we're free now, and so we can play, we're there to play golf every day. We're free when the Egyptians are not on top of us. You've got to say, you haven't got the main point. The main point that we are taking from this, yes, people, there are rules. There's a Seder to life, there's a Seder to everything that we're doing. And as we've said before, every person should be thinking about themselves. In which way can they be adding their bits to Klal Yisrael? We are part of Klal Yisrael. That's why there's Pesach, Matzah, more. There's activities, things that need to be done. Every person doing their own particular things. We have a framework of mitzvahs, and then everybody looking towards their own particular expertise that they can be adding to Klal Yisrael. That's really what we're talking about. And with that, gentlemen, and the final highlight, of course, all leading up to, it's the Hallel and the Nishmas at the end. And it's actually mentioned in Mishnah Berurah. I'm not going to refer poor old Peter again. But the Mishnah Berurah, the Shulchan Aruch says that the Seder should be said in language that you understand. It's no just to say words, it's say in language. And he mentions there from Londres, actually, probably London, one of the Rishonim who actually used to say it in the foreign language to make sure that everybody understood what we're saying. So it's the idea, we're full of gratitude. We're full of gratitude to Hashem, and certainly this year we should be. Baruch Hashem, we're not out of it yet, we know, but we are a long way than when we started this a year ago. Baruch Hashem, and when we say Shechianu this year, it's a different. Sadly, there are a lot of people who are not with us this year. So Shechianu, the Baruch Hashem, we are where we are, and it's the Hallel and particularly the Nishmas. Have a look at the translation during the Seder of the Nishmas. That we're saying there, we're full of gratitude to Hashem, and that gratitude, everything that we've got, whatever the situation on the Panosa side, on the health side. Yes, whatever the situation is, we're full of gratitude. And what it means, really, the gratitude is that we're hoping that this is really going to give us the impetus to move onwards and upwards. And with that, gentlemen, I know we're very late tonight. This is not quite Chatzos, but moving on there. But with that, gentlemen, I wish you all well. This is instead, of course, of next week. So that's why it's a bumper share. With that, gentlemen, I wish you all a very good kosher Yontov, a simchas Yontov, Yiddish, a freilichen Yontov, as they say. Enjoy that too. Enjoy each and every one in their own particular area. And we look forward to meeting after Yontov and Mirz Hashem. And that will be in 2 weeks' time, all being well. So
What's the problem with